can I introduce myself? My name is Chris Davis from the ALDE group, and just like to thank my group for sponsoring this meeting and paying for the sandwiches. My colleague Carl Hagland will say a few words of introduction in a moment. I guess we all agree that the object should be to ensure that we have the maximum number of fish in the sea and a sustainable future for the fishing industry. And yet we've managed to get ourselves into this position where 80% of our fisheries are being fished unsustainably, where stocks are far below the levels that the seas are capable of supporting, where we have to import more than 60% of the fish we use in Europe, and where our fishermen are every day throwing back into the sea dead tens of thousands of tons of fish, which is completely ludicrous. So we're looking forward to the Commission to bring forward some radical proposals for reform. Now, over the months, we've already heard from Commissioner Damanaki that she wants a sustainable policy, one that insists that member states follow scientific advice, that seeks to achieve maximum sustainable yields, and that she wants to end micromanagement from Brussels and replace it with a more devolved approach so far as possible. And I don't think many people in the Parliament will disagree with these principles. But the devil will be in the detail. And if stocks are to recover, then there has to be a reduction in fishing effort. Basically, the fish have got to have time to have some sex, or at least breed, before we catch them. So my fear is that the reforms will be weakened by those who think only in the short term and who put the immediate wish of fishermen to fish as much as possible before the long-term need to build up the fish stocks to provide them and future generations with a secure future. So I believe there's a need for a cross-party group in the Parliament to press for the reforms that are needed to ensure that we have, as a long-term goal, the ability to put more fish in the sea and to secure jobs for fishermen. And for too long, you know the way this Parliament works. The Agriculture Committee is stuffed full of farmers. The Environment Committee is full of greenies, like myself. Fisheries Committee tends to be full of the fishermen's representatives. And I think it's time we made sure that the Parliament's debates on these were more fashioned by those who are also thinking of our constituents, who by and large are simply consumers, the people who don't catch fish but who eat it. And as well as those MEPs from the nations that have fishing fleets, we need to involve MEPs in the debate from those countries who don't have fishing fleets, but who still eat fish. So after today's meeting, I plan to call another one in Strasbourg next month, and I hope that members who are seriously interested in saying, how can we cross-party work together to shape the position of our group, and in the short term, perhaps to help shape the position of the Commission. And I hope that that meeting will be equally well supported by members. So I'll stop there and pass to my colleague Carl Hagland.
Thank you, Chris. Allow me first of all to say that I'm happy that there are so many people here. It's delighting that we have to bring in more chairs, and I'm sure that at the next meeting in Strasbourg there's going to be even more people present. Let's hope so. Personally, I am actually very happy, first of all, that we have this meeting, and second of all, because I actually want to be an optimist when it comes to actually changing the CFP reform. I claim that the European Common Fisheries Policy is one of the biggest failures of the European Union. I seldom tend to be very critical to what the EU does. I can be critical, but when it comes to the CFP, I personally think it's maybe the biggest failure I can mention when it comes to the European Union and what we do. And therefore, a large reform of the CFP is, in my world, necessary. I think we did in the Parliament a good job with the Green Book and the report on that last winter. It did, in my view at least, take a good direction, and I'm also personally convinced that the Commission is trying to do the right things when it comes to actually reforming the Common Fisheries Policy. But in order to be successful, we need to be politically strong, and we need to have a Parliament which actually calls for ambitious reforms. And therefore, I think this spring will be very important for us to work together in the Parliament to actually also enlighten our colleagues on what the big problems are that we are facing, because I think Chris explained very well in brief numbers what the situation is like. And coming from the Baltic Sea region, where the sea is in a total catastrophe, I know that also the fisheries reform will have a very big impact on already that area of the European Union. At the same time, we have managed to export our own fisheries policy through the fisheries partnership agreements, so that our bad politics can also be seen in other parts of the world, not only in the seas of the European Union, but also, for instance, in Africa, where we now conduct our more or less bad policies. So we have a lot to do, and I'm happy that so many people are here to discuss this topic. And we have brought together a lot of experts and a lot of colleagues and others, so I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting discussion today and hopefully during the months to come. So I think I'll end here, and Chris will introduce our speakers.
Yes, thank you very much, Carl. And so let's get underway. And by the way, we will be passing around, or in some way distributing a form. I'd be grateful if you could just add your names and email addresses so that we can follow this up this meeting with further information and keep in touch. So let me start off by introducing Oliver Drews here, who is the spokesperson for Commissioner Damanaki. Oliver, I know you can't reveal what's likely to be in detail in the proposals for reform, but perhaps at least you can set the scene for us.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it would a bit like, I think I'm obliged here to fill my slot a bit, because it has been given to me, and I think it's a very important issue. Of course, I could shortcut the whole thing and say, you've exactly pointed out what the problem is, and we do entirely agree. But that doesn't help us much further. When Commissioner Damanaki came to office, and she refers to that all the time, one of the things which shocked her most, and she repeatedly had said that, is really the situation of overfishing. And she made a presentation to the ministers at the council in June last year, where she kind of clearly presented again the problem, reminding them that like only 8 out of the 136 stocks which we are managed are likely to be healthy by 2022, sorry, that we are moving down, but that we're coming from a situation where we have 80% overfishing in the European Union. If you compare that to the global average, it's 25% there. And at that moment in time, studies we had were showing that 94% of stocks are fished above maximum sustainable yield. And as you know, maximum sustainable yield basically means like how much you can take out that the fish or the fish stock is healthy in the long run, that we can fish it in the future, and that basically will be around. Now, some people contest these figures, others say it's higher, others say it's lower, but I don't think that's the point really. The point is that that something has to be done, and that is as clear as it could be. Now, there have been reforms in the past. They did achieve certain objectives in their time. It's easy to say now that they were wrong or were probably not going far enough. But Commissioner Damanaki is now faced with the situation that a lot has to be done. As he put it to the Commissioner, it is highly necessary. Tough and difficult decisions are needed to prevent the slow death of the fishing sector. So a reform is highly needed. And the reform is needed for everyone, not in let's say, an ecological versus industry debate. It is something which concerns everyone. And if you see the situation now as compared to, let's say, earlier reforms a decade ago, the situation has changed slightly. Some of the factors are, A, the situation is more dramatic. Last reform could set out certain elements for change, for example, going to long-term management plans. But a very interesting thing is happening, and that is, I think, happening in this room, and that makes a big change to past reforms. People have understood that this is a societal issue. it's not a sectoral issue for let's say the specialists. In other words, when some people who know me for a long time and know a bit about what I've done in the past and everything else, like, and who work in this line of prejudice as regards fisheries policies, they say, "Oh, you only have to work in December now, because everything is divided up in December, and then the rest of the year nothing is happening." That's exactly not the point. So this sectoral approach is, as you have put it, one of the big failures of policies we have. Why could it happen? Why did it happen so far? Because it's a classical policy where the sectoral dominance is so prevalent that, and the devils are always in the detail, that when you come to the nitty-gritty decision-making, there are always people who better know how to organize in a certain way, and people who are also caught in a prisoner's dilemma. It's not about blaming someone or say you have done it wrong or this is that. When Commissioner Damanaki came here, she found a certain situation, and by looking at it, maybe there's hope for change. Now, the classical dilemma between short-termism and long-termism, and the fact that one has to break this situation of long-term versus short-term open, and that we feel, Commissioner Damanaki feels, that we can only bring about broad change if we have real support, not only in terms of, oh yeah, we all believe in sustainable fish and let's be all happy and have a decent and healthy fish and everything else. No, one needs a type of cross-party, cross-sectoral initiative where people show it's everybody's concern, and we see very recent initiatives. Many people might have watched the UK Channel 4's use fish fight. That's, for example, a good example of putting these kind of things on the agenda. Or I'd say one of the most constructive drivers of cross-party reform is this industry NGO or NGO industry alliance, who together work on changing the policies. I think some of their representatives, I know some of their representatives are here in the room. So that we have to move towards a win-win situation for everyone. So the timing has advanced quite far. You know that the proposals are going to be presented by mid this year. I cannot say anything about it. They're being drafted at the moment. But you know some of the imperatives, some of the incentives of Damanaki, like going to long-term management plans, basing her policy on scientific advice, applying more the precautionary principle, and going to more regionalization as well, and simplification of decision-making. Discards is going to be addressed, and the external dimension is certainly not going to be forgotten. It has been mentioned, and because what we do at home, we should preach and practice abroad, and it's also not enough that we say others are worse. Because you could say, like, oh, well, but other nations fishing out there in the international waters have no rules at all. At least we have some decent rules, or we have rules, if they are decent or not. That is a matter under consideration. I'm certainly not saying either that they're undecent, but there is a lot of work to be done in that field as well. So the external dimension should be tackled as well and taken as a mirror of what we do at home. I think that is like setting it out basically a bit. What we certainly hope is that we have in the coming weeks and months a lot of push from those who are for the win-win situation, because this is not a debate of the ecological versus the industry or the fish against the fisherman and these kind of things. It's very simple, as Commissioner Damanaki puts it. If there is no fish, there is no fisherman. Now this sounds very banal, but this is the short and long-termism which come into play. So we have to try to achieve a long-termism where we also help those who only can afford to think short-term, so that together we have a reform which really worth it. And again, let me remind the figure. The global average is, according to the figures we had in summer last year, 25% overfishing, and in the EU, it's, according to those figures, 80%. I mean, everybody understands this is an untenable situation. So we hope that these groups, this kind of initiatives here, could help to boost, to remind us, and to press for a real reform in the interest, in the end, of everyone.
Thank you. Let's have a couple of questions now before we move to our next speaker. Can I just start off with one? The issue of overcapacity, is that going to be addressed in the CFP reform? And frankly, from your observations of the Council, do you expect wholehearted support from every government for these CFP reform proposals, or do you expect that the Commissioner will have a job of persuasion to do?
I'm quite puzzled by your second question.
Or do you want to try to bring some others in first? Okay. Perhaps.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the opportunity to come together like this. I believe that there should not be a conflict between the ecological debate and the conservation debate and the needs of the fishing industry. I think that we can work both hand in hand. And I've spoken to Commissioner Damanaki on this on a number of occasions, and I do think that this is possible and indeed desirable for the future. So the first thing I would say is the necessity to bring the industry on board. And I know that the Commissioner has actually made a number of visits. She's visited Scotland, for example, but it is absolutely essential because too many of our fishermen see the Common Fisheries Policy as doing things to them, rather than as them working with the policy. And I think that that is absolutely important. We've had a very interesting debate in the United Kingdom recently over the issue of discards, and I think that this should be hugely up the agenda. It was normally my email is not full of people requesting information on fisheries policy or discards, but this series of programmes has sparked the debate on this issue, and it is hugely, hugely important and one that will have to be addressed. Can I also say the importance of regionalisation? Those are the three things that I really want to impress. If we don't have real regionalisation, it's of no value.
Just take one. I think there's one more. And then we'll move. We'll have another opportunity later in the meeting.
Thanks, Chris. Bill Newton-Dunn from the Liberal Group. I wondered about the question of enforcement. There's no need to name any of the member states because probably it's true in every single member state's case. They're not going to enforce it on their own fishermen so much as shouting at the other countries. Is the Commission going to consider leaving enforcement to the member states themselves, each in their own waters? Or could we perhaps have a federal enforcement force?
Okay, Oliver, can you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the issue of overcapacity as such is a very clear one because overcapacity is a source of taking more out than what's in there. So overcapacity is certainly going to be addressed, and it's a very important issue. It's a clear one of the clear reasons for problems. Now, the governments. I mean, one has to be very clear here as well. I mean, the governments play a very, very decisive role via the Fisheries Council, because in the end, they like the European Parliament, are going to amend the proposals, or change them, or alter them, or turn them upside down. Now, I think it would be particularly unwise, and I'm certainly not going to do that, to point out the governments and everything else, but I think we discussed earlier the short-termism versus the long-termism and the issue of thinking in a long-term strategic way as against short-term electoral or other direct pressure group interests. Let's have pressure on more sustainable elements in order to make sure that in the end of the day the governments become the real partners in this, and some of them are more geared towards than this, others are less geared towards than this, but I think we have reached a situation where every minister, when he has an introduction to the subject, would have kind of an introduction which is about sustainability. Now, I think we should make sure that it doesn't stop with the introduction, but then when it comes to the last page of what they say and what they then, in the end, they vote for, is going to be in line with sustainability, and then exactly in the sense as you said, that it shouldn't be a conflict. This is not something against the fishermen or for the fishermen, or against or the other consideration. And I mean, it sounds so obvious, almost banal, I would say, but I think in this policy, it's you can visualize it so easily. You cannot take out more fish than what's in there. Once it's out, it's out. So you have to develop a policy that people can fish for the future. And this is primarily, I would say, also in the fishermen's interest. Now, yeah, the Commissioner has been visiting Scotland, has seen some good examples there, and you were referring to Hugh's Fish Fight on Channel 4, and an initiative of some another famous British and international chefs. The Commissioner has addressed them in her speech in Chatham House last week in London. She is in good contact with you, and you might see in a famous British paper, which I'm not going to mention here, that where you says we believe that Commissioner Damanaki is on our side in this fight, and actually he is going to come to. He has visited her in November, and he's going to come again in March. So, but this is one of the important awareness-raising issues which I was talking about earlier, where I think nobody would have believed 5 years ago that you could have so many people interested in a fisheries issue, which shows again that it became a general societal issue. And you need, it's more than just kind of this kind of trigger things like that one bluefin tuna costs 300,000 euros on the fisheries exchange in Tokyo. But these kind of things just make people realize that there is an issue out there. I was very pleased that you mentioned enforcement, because I wanted to say something about it, and I frankly just forgot. Enforcement has been, over the years, the most neglected child of the whole fisheries policy, because just designing some nice legislation, it doesn't mean anything if people, in the end of the day, can do out there whatever they want. It's not being controlled. Now we are in the situation that we have since January last year, so January 2010, for the first time, based on the IUU, 2 control regulations applicable in the European Union who apply across the board. So we have now some better rules. I'm not saying they're working perfectly, but at least we have a set of rules. And the implementing rules of these 2 regulations will enter into force. I don't know the precise date, but it's going to be early April, end of March again, and that is going to be for the Commission moment of stock taking, where we will see how they have been working and what else should be done to address the issue of control and to have better instruments. I'm like you mentioned federal. Well, we have the agency in Vigo, which is a limited set of possibilities, as you know, but at least we have it. So that was a good beginning, but only a beginning. We have now a set of rules where you have Europe-wide the same basic standards, which is very important, because if there's too much fragmentation, it's just going to be very complicated, and everybody who has ever been close to the sea or visiting some countries just sees for himself that's how one could easily take some fish out without being checked by anyone. Now, so that is a big issue. Enforcement is a big issue and will remain one of the single pillars of success of any fisheries policy, and there should be done more investment in control and enforcement actually than ever has been done. If you look, for example, at the instrument of infringements, it never has been such a serious matter in the fisheries policies. If you see how long infringement cases took, well, you need evidence in courts. We didn't have really the means to collect data and evidence. We have it now for about 5 years, but that's also very young. And again, the control regulations will be evaluated, and we have the enforcement rules coming into place end of March, early April, and that's going to be a moment of stock taking where we also would be very happy if people come in with comments or criticism or ideas for improvement.
Oliver, thank you very much. Right, well, let's move on. You touched upon public support and the public interest in the issue, which in some countries is now very strong, in other countries perhaps not. But I think those of us who wish to see and support strong reform need to know that the public are on our side, and above all putting the politicians in their countries under some pressure to achieve that reform. So we need the NGOs to be working coherently and effectively to bring that about. So let me introduce Louise Hill, the Head of Marine Policy with WWF. I don't know whether you can speak just for WWF or on behalf of a number of NGOs, Louise.
Try and switch the microphone. I think I'll speak primarily about WWF because that's what I'm most familiar with, but obviously I will touch on the fact that the NGOs are working together in Brussels and across the network. A little background. First of all, WWF is an international organisation, and across Europe we have a number of offices in many of the member states, and all of us are working together on CFP reform, really pushing in as many member states as we can, as well as here in Brussels. We have 10 offices working on this issue, so we really think it's a major issue, something very important that needs resolving. And because we know our voice is strengthened in both the member states and here in Brussels, we're working together with other NGOs. We agree on some points. There's other points where we see differences in the detail, once again, the devil being in the detail. But I think we're working together and working strongly, and we'll be hoping to talk to a lot of people about our concerns about the CFP reform and hoping to see it move towards a more sustainable future for fisheries. It's reassuring to see that the Commission is already talking about some of the things we believe and we have been fighting for a long time, but we believe fisheries has to be managed on a long-term basis. We think regionalisation is the only way forward, and obviously the external dimension is important. And it's reassuring to see that those messages are getting out and are being picked up. Without a long-term approach and based on a fisheries, at the minute fisheries management is very much single species, and we think that it needs to move forward to a more fisheries-based. All the fish are swimming together. You can't just take out one fish, and that's really where discards come from, is trying to catch one stock without catching everything else mixed together. And so moving from single stock management to fisheries-based management is also essential to deal with discards. And we realise that obviously working with the NGOs is important, but furthermore we need to be working with other people involved and who have a stake in the marine environment. And for that, WWF has been working a lot with industry, both here in Brussels and at national levels. Here in Brussels, we've created an alliance with a number of the organisations, the trade associations that are based here in Brussels, with Eurocommerce, with APSI, and with Eurocoop. And we're using this for platform to really get a strong message out, to show people that this isn't a green or just an environmental issue. This is an issue about everybody's future. If there's no fish in the future, these people don't have a job, and the environment is a worse place. So we can work together, have a stronger message and a coherent and joined-up message working together. This is something that has opened a lot of doors for us, and we're taking this message out to as many people as we can, working on national levels at member states and here in Brussels. Prior to moving to Brussels last October, I lived in Scotland, and I think Scotland is, as it's already been mentioned, is somewhere that really a lot of work is already being done, is bringing everyone together, discussing. And WWF sits on a body that was created by the Scottish Government. This is an example of regionalisation really working. It's an example of taking innovation within the constraints of the present CFP, but it's an example we'd like to see having the potential to be rolled out on much wider scale and in many more places. So in Scotland, the government, scientists, fishing industry, both catching sector processors, retailers, and the NGOs meet together at a monthly steering group to decide on how the fishing can carry on, how to apply the rules that are in place, how to optimize things so that fishermen can fish profitably, but also guaranteeing the long-term future of their fisheries. And it's interesting talking about enforcement. I was contacted at the beginning of 2010 by a journalist who called me up and said, I'm investigating enforcement issues across European fisheries. I'd really like to know, in Scotland, it used to have a really high level of infractions. Since February 2008, there's no infractions. Why? And I said, that's when the conservation credit system, so this system that credits fishermen for taking conservation measures, was set up. And so I think enforcement obviously needs to be a federal issue, but it also needs to be, if fishermen have more responsibility, if they're accountable for what they're taking out the sea and not landing, then there's a much higher chance that they will follow the rules rather than fighting against them all the time. So my main message is that there's no doubt with anybody that there's a need for a reform. It really needs to be radical. We need to be sure that it's as strong as it can to ensure a sustainable future both for fish and for fishermen.
Thank you, Louise. Maybe I could just make a political plug here to my colleagues and to assistants. This is going to be an issue which is going to go up the political spectrum over the next few months. And so if those members from each country who want to take an active interest and position themselves as someone who's got something to say have the opportunity of getting some political points here, you know, with their media. And I hope that there'll be NGOs providing them with support. So be aware, this is a sexy political issue. Lots of press, perhaps, in member states. OK, now, moving on. I'm conscious that, to our shame, while politicians have failed to make some of the changes necessary to put in place sustainable policies, we have sometimes been overtaken by commercial interests, by the retailers, who have recognised the obvious facts about the need for sustainability before ourselves. Unilever, for example, in partnership with WWF, set up the Marine Stewardship Council almost 15 years ago in order to try and ensure that we still had sustainable fish supplies in 100 years' time. And we have representatives now of two of Europe's major retailers who I hope will also touch upon this subject. Let me start by introducing then Ludwig Wilnegger from the German retailer Edeka, Head of Public Affairs. Ludwig.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I have a presentation on my stick. I hope I can. I hope there are no private pictures on it. I had a bad surprise once.
Like you catching a big fish.
yeah. So then you can follow my presentation. But I think I can start. And I think, yes. And then we have Fish for Future. It's the first presentation. Okay. So first of all, we can go to the second page already. Okay, thank you. So this should be the short, let's say, structure of my presentation. And first of all, I want to introduce to you Edeka. And it is not just for publicity's sake to introduce it to you, because it shows how difficult it is to introduce, let's say, a policy within a very difficult company Edeka is. Because Edeka is a cooperative. We can go to this third slide. Edeka is a cooperative formed of more than 4,500 independent retailers. So that means that our CEO at the headquarters, he's not able to push the button and within 24 hours every outlet is doing what he wants. So that means that he has to convince our independent retailers about our strategy, about our company policy. We are employing more than 290,000 employees. The turnover is 42 billion euros. And concerning fish, the turnover is more than or nearly 700 million euros. That means we are the biggest fish retailer in Germany. And we think this gives us a special responsibility because, as Mr. Dreves said, the fisheries policy is also a societal issue, and we take our role in this aspect very seriously. And as we see, we have 12,000 outlets, and we communicate daily, and I repeat, daily with our consumers. And they ask us in our shops, what do you do? What are your projects? Haven't you seen the latest news on this or that? So before then introducing our alliance with WWF, the decision why we did this was also that we felt the pressure from the consumers, but we were also convinced ourselves, and let's say more or less the CEO was convinced to take this step forward. Then sustainability is not, let's say, only concentrated on our supply, but also on energy and environment, and also on social aspects towards our employees and society in general. We can move on, please. So concerning our assortment, what are the challenges? And I listed here several challenges. And for us, the most important challenge was really to overcome the too many labels we have. So therefore, we were going to WWF saying, what are your standards? What do you think? How can we focus on a clear message towards the consumers? Because we also want to sell our fish. We are not doing this for, let's say, any higher reasons or grounds. We are businessmen. We want to make profit. And therefore, for us, it's very important also to make profit, and the communications towards the consumer is very important. So, and when we talk about then sustainability, it is also very important that we cover as many different product categories as possible. And therefore, we are in a constant dialogue with WWF, also perhaps to enlarge our cooperationship. And we can move on. And now we can go, let's say, to the fish sector. And I think we should underline that the consumer behavior in every member state is different. And when we look at Germany, let's say we have 20% Alaska pollock, then we have herring, and then we have salmon, and then we have tuna and pangasius. And of course, pangasius is, you know, there's a heated debate on the issue of pangasius at the moment, but German consumers buy pangasius. And on the right column, you see how the Germans like to eat fish. And let's say number one is deep frozen fish. Then we have conserven, that means tinned fish, then shellfish, and only 9% is fresh fish. And then already smoked fish with 8%. So this is completely different, I think, from the Mediterranean member states. But we have to take this into account because it shows or reflects the structure of our suppliers. We can move on, please. And now I want to shortly present you our partnership with WWF. What is WWF doing? WWF is giving us advice how we can source in a sustainable manner fish. And what do we do internally? Of course, we have to make a revision of our private labels. we have to talk to our brand manufacturers, and there we have, let's say from our experience, we have already here a big differentiation between private labels and manufacturer brands. And of course, when we look at private labels, we can directly take into account the advice of WWF, go to our suppliers, tell them we need this, we need that, and we need, let's say, a different recipe for maybe a fish burger or something else. So in this area, we are much more successful than talking with our, let's say, brand manufacturers. And later on, I will give you some numbers, and you will see that we have already switched or changed, let's say, the private labels. Nearly to 80% is now in the use of WWF sustainable. There are other measures like delisting endangered species, like eel perhaps or shark. And of course, then we also took the decision to lobby on national and international level. Because as EDEKA is a cooperative, it's very difficult. We are only in Germany, and we have been not engaged in any political debate, to put it that way, the years before. So for us, it's also a matter of societal, how do you say, demands and etc. Next slide, please. So what do we do for WWF? We are sponsoring some of WWF's projects. I mentioned one here, and on the other hand, from, let's say, our marketing department, a very important issue is that we also found an agreement with WWF to label our, let's say, sustainable products with the WWF logo, the panda beer, that I think more or less every consumer knows. So, and to be honest, this partnership now is working since nearly 3 years. And the first 2 years it was difficult, and the turnover went down because we had to delist a lot of suppliers. But now, let's say, with the WWF logo, the turnover is increasing, and we see that also, let's say, on a midterm, basis, you can be successful. And this was very important, and this was also the reason why our CEO is, let's say, thinking of enlarging the partnership with WWF. Please go ahead. Okay, I think I was more or less telling this. Yeah, maybe just to go to the last point, communication. We are now trying, or we already did for 3 of our products. It's not much, I know, but now we are labeling our products with a code, and when you enter then the code on the website of EDEKA, then you know the fisherman, you know the boat, you know the date of the catch, you know the area where the fish has been catched, and a lot of additional information. But until now we did not receive, let's say, the photo of the captain of the boat, but I hope we improve. So, and what was very important for us, and now I will come back to the structure of EDEKA. EDEKA is also, there are also 7 regional, more or less, wholesale companies who independently can purchase their products and also fish. So for us it was very important to draft guidelines for our purchases, because we do not only purchase at national level but also at regional level. And as I said, the CEO cannot say anything to, let's say, the CEO of a regional wholesale company. So everything in our company is based on convincing, doing the right thing. So for us it was important to draft guidelines that are now more or less applicable to all of our, let's say, wholesale companies, and especially to our independent retailers. And let's say, I repeated it already, let's say, do not buy fish from that species that are threatened by extinction or with extinction. First, we can go on. Try to always give preference to MSC certified products, and I think this is also a very important issue. We are communicating with our suppliers, and we are giving them, let's say, the full information we have that we got from WWF to make their business also sustainable. Because we tell them until the end of 2011 and the beginning of 2012, our products should be 100% sustainable. You have to change. And the first year was very difficult. The second year it got better, and now I think we are in a constant dialogue with our suppliers, and it works very well. Please go on. And this shows, let's say, for a fish burger, one example how, let's say, in 2008, how the verdict of WWF was red, red, red. And then it took some time because we had then to change the recipe. Then, of course, we had to bring in our quality department, and it was very difficult. And the end of the story is that now we make with this sustainable fish burger more profit than before. Go ahead, please. And now you see how the development of labeling our products happened. You can see 1/3, and now we are already 57%. But this applies, let's say, to the private labels, because with the private labels we are much, much faster than with the manufacturer brands. Next slide, please. I forgot to mention that also our subsidiary Netto Marken discount is a soft discount, to put it that way. So the prices at Marken Netto discount are a little bit higher than ALDE or Lidl. And there we achieved already 50%, even if, let's say, the action started January last year.
Can I just, sorry, Ludwig, can I just bring you to an end? Because
okay.
I want to make sure there's time to questions for you.
One last slide. Okay, and as I said, we want to lobby for more sustainable CFP. End of story.
Thank you. So you're going to be playing Edeka's going to be playing a political role, a lobbying role, speaking out publicly about this issue over the next year or so?
Therefore I'm here.
Okay. Yes, please.
Thank you. A very, very interesting presentation, and thank you for it. Considering that 60%, maybe almost 70% of the fish that we eat in Europe is actually imported into Europe from third countries, how do you treat third country imports, and do you apply the same standards and rules? I'm just thinking of the issue. I mean, I'm also sit on the Agriculture Committee. We have this debate all the time that we have high standards in Europe, but we import and use a lot of fish that may not be produced either as sustainably or to the same standard.
We apply the same standards.
Simple as that. And that's because they're Marine Stewardship Council certified?
Yes.
Or what? That's how you do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Via the standards.
Yeah.
But we buy at national level through the importers or...
Okay, our last speaker, move on quickly. Stephanie Matte from the French region, Carrefour. I remember going into one of your stores about 25 years ago and seeing the biggest fish counter I've ever seen in my life, because maybe the UK has stopped eating a variety of fish, so it's quite impressive. So I recognise you have an important role in this debate.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to give us the opportunity to speak today. In few words, just to present Carrefour, but few words and figures. We are the first retailer in Europe, the second one in the world. We are present in 34 countries, so a lot of diversity of fishmonger, a lot of diversity of reality and consumer demand, with the concentration of our activity in 10 countries in Europe. So that explains that we are very sensitive to work with the European institution. Carrefour, for a long time, for 10 not 10 years, but 15 years, has been making efforts to protect biodiversity and natural resources. We have a partnership with WWF on a lot of subjects, not only fish, for 11 years, I think. I think we were the first one in France. The group considered this a part of its civic duties, and it is very important for us for the sustainability for our activities. As Mr. Davis said at the beginning, Europe and also the world in general have an issue. 80% of fish stock are overexploited or fully exploited, and we can add that 38 million of people work and are living directly from fishing or farming, fishing farm. So to maintain an offer affordable for long term for our customer, also to contribute to preserve the natural resources and also to preserve the job associated, Carrefour instituted a responsible fishing policy 5 years ago. The aims of the policy in 3 points is to achieve sustainability for all our assortment, frozen, in can, or also fresh, to fight against illegal fishing, and also to increase awareness and training of the Carrefour employees and also the customers. So practically, now our daily work is to work closely with WWF in a working group we created in 2007 on fish, to develop a private label product coming from well-managed, science-based fisheries, to stop selling endangered species, so we can quote the stop of bluefin tuna, also emperor, we stopped it in 2008. Also, it is to develop MSC product. I'm quite proud in France to say that we are the first seller of MSC product, and we have the widest range of product MSC, private label MSC. We developed also some products called Fishermen of Our Coast. It's to offer products to our consumers sourced locally in France or in the coast. Also, we developed some communication tool towards employees, of course, to train them, but also towards the customer, because they are not really aware of the issue of fish. And we developed some leaflets explaining the situation. We developed some recipes that use some responsible fish. We developed also some commercial operation. We call it les jours bleus, the blue days. These blue days, it's a commercial operation, but with an overall message on MSC and sustainability. And also, we have strict specifications on farm fish. For example, we asked our supplier not to use any non-GMO feed. So, in fact, I just make a sort of summary of our policy, but to go back in our discussion today and to go further, we are convinced that all the supply chain and all the associated institutions have to work and communicate together and very closely to reach sustainability. So when I say together, it's scientists have to work very closely with fishermen. I know that in France there is some link, sometimes fishermen and scientists, but really not enough, I think so. Of course, we have all to work with NGO. I really think it'll go in the good way. All the elements of the supply chain have also to communicate and work together to have a big traceability and to all ask the same things. And I think with all this communication, we will reach to to fight against illegal fishing, to reach an efficient control, and to reach a sustainable way to manage the fisheries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And can I put the same question to you, given the political debate that is going to be taking place during the course of this year and next? Is Carrefour going to be playing a role, a public role within France?
We try for a long time to play a public role, and we try to do lobby in France and in Europe with Ferdinand there to explain our position and to explain that we are worried about this, and we all have to work together on this. So yes, we will lobby on it too.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, can I throw this over for the last 20 minutes or so, please?
My name is Lisa Borges. I work for Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, SFP. And I want to talk a little bit about what we do and a little bit my opinions also on the issues here discussed. SFP uses the leverage that retailers and suppliers have to change things in the catching sector level and to, of course, improve sustainability in general, fisheries in general. I wanted to pick a little bit on a point that Oliver did, the Commission, about societal issues. I take that very seriously and actually very personal. So much that I quit my job in the European Commission 3 months ago as an expert on discards, and I decided to move to Sustainable Fisheries Partnerships to try to change things a little bit stronger. I believe so much that I'm trying to make some of the policies, some of the decisions within, trying to pass that on to retailers and suppliers. Now, I wanted to pick up also on something that Louise said that I think is fundamental within the discussions of fisheries issues here, is that accountability is a point, and it's a key point that the fishing industry needs to take over. They need to be accountable for what they do instead of being always on the low passive level and just waiting to be caught by doing something. Now, accountability is fundamental when we talk about environmental issues, such as discards policies, such as protection of protected species, closed areas, and everything. Accountability can be reached, and some of the methodologies already existing for VMS or others, but it needs to be accompanied with new methodologies, and it needs to be taken by the fishing industry. So they need to prove what they do is correct, and they need to show that to the world. At least that's my personal opinion for such. But that will require a change of the control and the accountability for landings, for at land, to change to at sea. For me, that's a crucial point, particularly on discard policies. The control of the fishing and the accountability needs to move to at sea, which requires a very big change in the control policies and control measures and the control technology in place today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Isabella Lövin. I'm a member of Parliament for the Greens. I have one reflection. Always when we talk about the industry and taking into the consideration the interests of the industry, I think 99.99% of the time we mean the fishing industry. But I mean, this meeting is showing that the industry as a concept is so much larger. We have the retailers, we have the processing industry, we have restaurants and chefs, and we also have recreational fishermen and tourism. All of those have economic interests in having sustainable fish stocks in the seas. And I would like to ask the Commission's representative here, and can you frame that fact into the discussions when we're talking about the reform of the Common Fisheries Policy? I mean, how many people are economically dependent on healthy fish stocks in Europe? And I bet that there are a lot more than are directly dependent on the fishing industry as such in coastal communities. And and also for the future, we all know how important this is. So that was one question. The other question was for WWF. It'd be extremely difficult to change anything if we don't have Spain on board, and this is something that really is worrying me at this moment. And I may also make the same question to Carrefour: how is it working in Spain with these questions? And also, I had another question for the representative of Carrefour. You were mentioning fishers from the coast as a label. Makes me a bit suspicious. Is that a sustainability label, or is it just only saying that this is fish taking out of some of the 88% overfish stocks in Europe? Because this is also a little bit tricky. Just saying that it's caught very close to the coast does not mean that it's sustainable. And also...
you could write a book, Isabella. Go.
I know. Well... Okay, I'll just stop there.
Take one more in this round. Please.
Thanks, Chris. David Tripp from the United Kingdom representation in Brussels. There's certain implied criticism earlier of the position of the Council on this. Of course, I can only speak for my own government, but I think we're very keen that the debate that we're going to have in the next months and years should be about what kind of radically different policy we have, rather than if we have one. So it's worth just putting that on record. In that context, could I say to Oliver Drews, he and others have touched upon the fact that this is a much wider issue. Could I ask him how the Commission intends to present that, rather than presenting the package of legislation and the communication from the start point of the existing legislative framework? Because I fear that if you start from there, we will never get very far. Thank you.
So let's have some responses, starting, I suppose, with Oliver.
Yeah. Through direct economic interest. Now, it did strike me when I was listening to a presentation of Lubchenco, who was brought about the change in the fisheries policy in the US, and WWF is very much aware of this presentation because they have been facilitating this thing, that she said that changes there only in the end of the day really became concrete when the big retailers got involved into the debate. And that is also a bit like, I'd say, maybe in a sense, the point of Hugh's fist fight, that he concretely kind of addressed some of the change as to kind of, look what's on your shelves in the end of the day. Because he kind of translates a broad consumer interest and into concrete economic purchasing behavior, either by the retailers or by the consumers directly. I take from your point that you want to make sure that it make clear that it's not just like one fishing boat or one fishing industry. It's a whole lot of economic sectors who are directly or indirectly, you can speak about even coastal regions, etc., who are part of this. And there we come back to the societal debate. It is a general issue of food, of la nourriture. Huh? It's not anymore something only for experts. Now, I think what you said is the crucial point, and I think I don't have an answer to that. I think we can only see the answer in 1 or 2 years' time, as if we were able to manage that kind of communication or that kind of putting messages across. But then again, I hide myself now between the societal debate. That's very easy now here, because I think it's not a task of the Commission only to make sure that we have change here. It's high time that we take it all together. And therefore, these kind of initiatives, I think, are very important, if not key to success, because it's good if some people, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's good if some people out there at different platforms say certain things. But if it doesn't come across and is linked with policy and policymakers, it's not going to be as successful, at least.
Okay, a couple of points. I mean, we obviously talk about, I'd first of all like to make a comment that wasn't addressed to me, but I still have something to say about talking about the industry. Obviously, when WWF talks about working with the industry, we do work with the catching sector in many countries, but as both Carrefour and Edeka have said, we have an alliance and we're working very closely with retailers, processors, and we're starting discussions with chefs and all people in the supply chain. We realize you can't just make things happen with one section of the industry, but all sectors of the industry. And about the work WWF is doing with Spain, I could probably write a book too. We're doing a lot of work. We have a team in our office in Spain who work long, hard hours and are doing great stuff. We're engaged with the Spanish government. The government has changed recently, and the new government is working more closely with NGOs and developing a roadmap of priorities that include fisheries issues. We work closely with industry. We have signed an agreement with a Spanish, I think they're retailers, Eroski, looking at my alliance expert. So we have good relationships with the retailers in Spain, and we are in discussions with Europesh and some of the catching sector. We have small-scale projects, and now we're trying to get some of the bigger guys on board as well. There's still a lot to do in Spain, there's no doubt, and the fact it's a new government, we still need to establish what the thoughts are and which way they are looking. But we're doing a lot of work in Spain, as we are in most countries of Europe. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk at more length if need be.
Stephanie, do you want to come in first, seeing as one question was directly?
Yeah, and also for Spain, just to complete, yes, Spain, it's we can say difficult to manage because as in France, in fact, there is a lot of diversity of fish. So we have a lot of work to do, and we apply the same policy. I present the policy we applied all over the world, in fact. So bluefin tuna, we stopped the bluefin tuna also in Spain, for example. And also in Spain, my colleagues work with Oceana, in fact, in Spain. And also in Spain, it's the beginning of MSC. So there is more and more industrial MSC. So, of course, we see that it's improved day after day, and so it's possible, and we continue to improve. And for the other question on fishermen of our coast, it's not really a brand. It's we developed such a signalétique in shops to show a link between the fishermen and the boat to the customers. So there is film in shops and things like that, and we work closely with WWF on this too, and we really choose which type of fish we sell as the other fish we buy. And this range of product concerns only a small fish, but under the maturity size. So small fish that are not so eaten by French people. So I know the word in French, but it could be taco. It's some little fish that are forget now. So we try to, but in a good state, with a well-managed state. So we try to put them in front of the customers with this label and with this history we tell when they see the fishermen.
Ludwig, do you want to say anything on this round?
Yes.
No, okay, please.
I just want to bring to your attention that, let's say, the competition in the food retail sector is very, very fierce. That means that our CEO normally is in a very bad mood. So when you approach him then with, let's say, a problem with an NGO, he gets in an even worse mood. So that means normally retailers of food industry do not always work closely together with NGOs. But in this specific, or let's say in this specific issue or area, It is very, very important, and I think this underlines how seriously we, let's say, retailers and also food industry, to some extent, take this debate. And it is not with that it is automatically that retailers work together with NGOs, and I really want to underline this.
Thank you. Couple of last questions or comments? Okay, so Carl, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Allow me first of all to thank our speakers, and Chris will probably do that once more when he wraps up. Allow me to say to you guys that I come from Finland, and I have no recollection that none of our retailers would ever have been interested in sustainable fisheries. So I'm happy to hear that there is positive development on the continent. It might even come over to us at some point, even though none of you have activities in my part of Europe, but you should. Personally, I think this was a very interesting discussion, and I know that many of us who want to do good in this field can learn a lot more, meaning that this is not a very easy sector for a politician to tackle, even though you have ambitions. You need to always get the facts straight, and the facts are not always very straight, and there are always a lot of different interests, so it's very good to get input from people who know these things better than we do. And therefore, I personally found this very useful, and I'm sure that we can continue these discussions during the spring. As our Commission representative said, the policymakers are in a very central position, and the European Parliament will have a big say on this. So I hope we can have a strong front, which we did already in the winter when we outlined the Green Paper, and therefore I hope to see you soon again to discuss these issues furthermore. I think I'll end there.
Thank you, Carl. And indeed, I do want to thank Oliver, Louise, Stephanie, and Ludwig for their presentations. Ludwig, thank you very much for pointing out, really, without realising it, that EDECA has a higher turnover than the government of Finland, I'm told. So does demonstrate that the just what influence the big retailers can have on this political issue. So thank you very much for coming. Do you think you're going to be on time? Do you think the CFP reforms are going to come out in May, early June? Or are you going to slip?
They will definitely be on time, but when that will be, I'll tell you in another session. But they're too late, as we know. There's 80% overfishing, and that's the basic point. That's why we're here.
Okay. Well, thank you once again. I hope we have your email addresses. We will keep in touch. For the members, there'll be a meeting to try and set up, I think, a group. I hope you agree that we should be trying to set some sort of all-party group here to act as a point of contact and liaison to campaign. I'll tell you how my concern here. My concern is that the European Commission will publish its proposals, and when in this Parliament, now that we have co-decision powers, the people who will be most interested in the issues are the traditional members of the Fishing Committee and those who represent large fishing communities. And the great majority of parliamentarians who actually think, we really do need sensible, long-term, sustainable policies, but actually don't take a day-to-day interest in them, will leave the decision-making in their working groups within their political parties to others. And so we end up, the great majority of parliamentarians, with a policy we don't actually want, but we didn't turn up to the working groups ourselves. And so we after that, we just follow the line. And that's, I think, what we must counter. We must make sure that we have a more diverse representation injected into this issue to ensure we get the political balance that's necessary to secure reform. So thank you very much indeed. We'll stop there.